Welcome to Walkabout the Galaxy, the nerdy astronomy podcast, where the science is universal, the opinions are personal, and the guests are out of this world. We are Strange, Charm, and Down, the Astroquarks, also known as Josh Caldwell,
Addie Dove, and Audrey Martin,
coming to you from Dragon Con 2024 in Atlanta, Georgia, and we are... Yeah, all right. We are thrilled to have Dr. Cady Coleman, PhD chemist and retired U.S. Air Force colonel, former NASA astronaut, and newly minted author as our very special guest. Cady, welcome to Walkabout the Galaxy.
Thank you very much.
We start our show with what we call a stumper, which is a question that is so stupid that it's hard to come up with a good answer. So our stumper today is space travel fantasy. So if you could be transported, Star Trek style, to and from some location in the solar system, you don't have to worry about travel time there or back. You've got all the appropriate spacesuit, safety equipment, everything you need. Where would you like to go? Anywhere in the solar system for an hour.
For an hour?
An hour spacewalk or EVA or surface activity somewhere in the solar system.
So I'm about like the immediate stuff. And Mars is soon. Not soon enough, though. And it's because we don't really know enough, right? So I would pick Mars so I could go and get, I mean, the rovers have been very kind, considerate. They've sent us a lot of data, satellites, all those things. That's really necessary, but there's a lot to know before people go, and I would love to be the Pathfinder. But I thought you were going to say, like, who would you go with?
That's coming later.
That's a good question, too. Who would you go with?
And I'm just going to say, you know, and
I'm really sorry, but I need to, Cady, you might need to be closer.
Closer, even though it goes bum, bum, bum. Like this? Okay.
In the microphone.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm doing
Oh, no,
this.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
So to say that I wanted to go with an all-woman crew,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a great appeal. I'm just saying, okay? But, you know, that would be actually not in line with what I think about, which is that everybody can contribute. I just want to select the guys, okay? Okay. And,
Fair.
And my husband gets to be one of them, yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'll never hear the end of it.
Can I say where on Mars, though?
Ooh.
You've just got an hour.
Oh, only an hour. I would definitely go to the Delta where they are. I forget what it's called.
Jezero?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's where I would go.
Yeah.
I mean, because more data, same place, really good idea.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, you
Very
can give the rover
scientific
a
answer.
nice pat.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you
true.
for your service, and then head back.
Audrey, where are you going?
Where am I going? I think Enceladus would be pretty cool.
Ooh, yeah.
The views from the surface would be really, really amazing. Maybe I could bring like some ice skates or something. And
South Polar region
Get to-
of Enceladus.
Sure,
see
Check out those
geysers.
tiger
yeah,
stripes.
see the
Yeah.
geysers.
Nice.
Make
Okay.
some tiger
Oh,
stripes.
yeah. You could check out the geysers.
Yeah.
How about you, Addie?
I think I would go to an asteroid. Because if you're transporting there, you can actually maybe sort of be on the surface.
Right.
And it's so hard to do still. We still don't really have great technology for like rendezvousing with an asteroid that's a tiny little rubble pile asteroid. So I think it'd be super fun to just sort of stand there and see if I sink.
I'm gonna be a particle in Saturn's rings.
Of course you are.
Bouncing around
Of course
in
you
Saturn's
are.
rings with a spacesuit.
You could be a moonlet
for an
in
hour.
Saturn's rings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Cool. Well, Cady has a new book out called Sharing Space, an Astronaut's Guide to Mission, Wonder, and Making Change, and our conversation with her is brought to you by Freefall. The bills keep coming, the car needs a repair, your friends and family are demanding more of your time. If everyday life is weighing you down, take a break with Freefall. Guaranteed to put a lift in your step and a puffy-eyed smile on your face. Get back in motion and back in control of your life with Freefall. Discovered by Galileo in Pisa, Italy in the 16th century and honed to perfection over the last 400 years, Freefall offers you the chance for personal growth by as much as 2 inches, with the removal of that pesky force that's stopping you from freely falling right now. Deceleration from Freefall may result in severe bodily injury or death. Freefall user assumes all liability. Freefall, still going.
Oh, still going.
Still going.
Our sponsors
Our
are very...
sponsors are eclectic.
They are. Still
If you're
going.
interested in sponsoring a future episode, let us know.
Let us know. So still going is a catchphrase for a real company, though.
Energizer?
Oh, I like Energizer's pretty good. Boeing.
Oh.
Nice.
Too soon.
I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you do a million things right, and then like you struggle with something really hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. Who is it actually?
It is Energizer.
It is
It's the bunny.
Energizer.
No way.
Good job.
Really?
It's
Good
the
job,
Energizer
Audrey.
bunny.
Okay.
Yep.
Yay!
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I never get these right.
Yeah. Addie, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'd love to. So oftentimes on Walkabout, so for our regular listeners, this is a little bit of a special, different episode than usual. We don't have any specific space news or specific topics. I guess there is some space news we could highlight really quickly. Obviously, the elephant in the room that I just sort of mentioned is that we're waiting for updates on what's going to happen with a bunch of different flight vehicles right now. SpaceX is back to launching, though. They were paused for like a hot minute, and now they're going again. And then we're waiting to see what's going to happen with them launching their vehicle up to the ISS and bringing back the crew that's been up there for a little while. So they're going to come back in February, we think. So that's been all sort of resolved since the last time we recorded, I think.
Yeah.
So there's there's been a lot of changing over the last week in terms of space flight and things going up and not going up. Also, in addition, Blue Origin launched their new Shepard vehicle. So this is a suborbital vehicle that we're big fans of because we've flown payloads on them. But they launched with 6 humans this time. So this is a suborbital vehicle. It's a rocket, launches up, capsule separates, comes back down, and they get 3 glorious minutes of free fall and time in space. So they go above the Kármán line. And so this mission was extra interesting to me. So they've been flying human spaceflight participants now for a while. And this flight had a guy from the University of Florida, Rob Furl, who actually studies space plants and how plants react to different gravitational levels. And so he was doing experiments during the flight. So he was one of the first folks who's actually been a researcher doing their science on these flights. And this is sort of the future we envision a lot of us who do these experiments. So it's very exciting for a few people to start getting to do that.
Katie, you, in addition to your book, you're featured in a documentary that talks about the challenges of long-duration space flight from a personal standpoint, as well as all the other challenges associated with that. And Butch and Sunny, who are up on the ISS right now for a little bit longer than they were anticipating being there. Could you comment on, like, you knew you were going up for months when you went to the ISS, so at some level you were prepared, I'm guessing, for that separation from your family. What about Butch and Sunny, who are now going to be up there for 8 or 9 months instead of 10 days or whatever was originally planned?
Well, we actually leave the ground knowing that you might not know, and it might be shorter, which is like, oh no, really? Because it's amazing, and you've worked so hard to be ready. And then once you get up there, the biggest thing is that once you get up there, it takes about a month to be good at working up there. And so then I just wanted to stay longer and longer. And actually a question came up on our mission, and there was, discussions of staying longer. And pick me. I will discuss it at home. We'll make a family decision. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. Think yes in the meantime. But that's not to belittle. It is definitely different for Butch and Sunny. But I think this is a really interesting exercise in what do you hear on the news, and how to process that, which you guys are all involved with Blue Origin and the other Virgin Galactic, and I'm a big believer in all these things.
Yeah.
They all do something really fascinating, and then the media just wants to talk about the 3 billionaires.
Yeah,
right.
And it's like hello, and I love that you guys on your podcast you really focus on what's real. And for Butch and Sunny, they have been assigned to Boeing for a couple of years, right? And it's a real great responsibility, and they're both test pilots, but it means they're not eligible for other flights, right? Or for going up to the space station.
Yeah.
And then to go up and only spend 8 days and then come back and be in the same line.
Right.
It's heartbreaking for them. That's why I wanted to stay, is that you come back and you are back in line. I would imagine they would have a pretty special place in the long duration line, having served in this way. But to be up there and get to stay longer and do more, and they're already so trained. Just take a look at their faces. Those looks are real. They are happier than anything I am hearing from other people. I'm friends with them, but not the kind of friend who's like writing every day or something.
Yeah.
And so that's what I hear. And nobody uses the word stranded. I think of the past couple of months as actually NASA at their best and doing better than before. Some of the taking longer was because they are trying really hard to listen to the voices that speak up. especially the ones that disagree.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I've been really proud of them, the way they're doing this stuff.
Yeah, it's been interesting to hear how much testing they're doing. So they're doing all this testing with Boeing and White Sands. They're doing testing on board. And like one of the coolest things to think about for me is like they have to do all the testing up there because when not all of it comes back.
Exactly.
Right? The things that
The
are
whole
having the
propulsion
problem,
module
the
doesn't
whole
come back.
propulsion module doesn't come back. So there's not a way to like see
What went
afterward
wrong?
what went wrong.
Right.
So they have to do all this testing up there. And like the way fluid, I've heard a lot of talk about fluid flow. So it's fluid flow in space. Like we really don't fully understand it still in
Right.
zero G conditions and how to move things around. And so it can cause all these interesting challenges that aren't things that we can measure here on the ground.
And a lot of times you want to make a decision based on facts, and they've done all this ground testing, but then how you compare how the thrusters worked in the ground testing to how they're going to work when they undock and at that critical time have to fire their engines to slow down a very precise amount facing a very precise direction. And if the thrusters are misbehaving at just the right time. So, you'd think that there's data and they could just go, here's the data, here's the decision. But from what I understand, the decision was that it's already a test flight, so it's a given, there's more risk. And then added on to that, they know what's wrong with the thrusters, but they don't know how to control it, right? That makes it a riskier way to come home. And even though they'll get pounded and Boeing will get pounded, and the right thing to do is to bring them home a different way.
Yeah. And they get to fly on another vehicle.
They do.
Oh, right.
And they get to
is
stay.
pretty exciting.
They're
they're
getting some excellent bonus time up there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
on the
and
ISS.
they did a lot of training to know what experiments are up there, what's happening up on the ISS. Like they were up to speed on what would be going on, so it's not like they're going in and like, oh no, I don't know how to do anything up here. They had a lot of training on the ground before they went up.
Well, and the
contingency
backlog of like the to-do list up there is unimaginable. I mean, you never even really finish the schedule, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. A thing that didn't work the size of a refrigerator was up there for years because it was never in the timeline to be able to take it apart in some safe way.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, do you ever cleaning out your attic? All of us would be better if we cleaned out our attics if we had them, right? Because you'd find stuff, but it's never at the top of the list. And Sonny and Butch are decimating that to-do list of
Nice.
maintenance
Oh, nice.
and
Yeah.
tasks. And it makes it a whole new world
Right.
for
Yeah.
research. So
Right.
start applying for those ISS missions too.
Yeah,
Okay, nice.
yeah, definitely.
good to know.
Speaking of which, we could segue to a little bit more discussion of some of the science
Science.
you did
Right.
on the ISS.
It's an astronomy podcast, so we've talked a lot about discoveries made by Chandra, and one of our favorite observatories that does amazing, cool things. I was just looking at a recent story from last month about its data contributing to understanding the separation of dark matter and ordinary matter in a collision between superclusters of galaxies. And the X-ray, Chandra's an X-ray observatory, and we're mentioning this because you deployed that telescope. What do you feel about like when you see discoveries from Chandra, knowing you're the person who basically pressed eject and sent it out and saw it go sailing up over the
Well, and
the
actually
cockpit?
somebody at the con here came up to me and said, I did my thesis on using Chandra data.
Yay!
I mean, so
That's amazing.
it's amazing to be part of a mission where it doesn't just end when your part ends. I mean, that's really it is actually the beginning.
Yeah.
And yet we train with the team, we met the scientists, and when we were not about to launch, but a couple days before, the Chandra's the heaviest thing and the biggest thing NASA's ever sent to space. And so it could only go in Columbia, was the only one who could go in. And so then it also gets loaded in vertical in the pad. So after it got loaded in, Michelle Tonini and I went out there to look over the payload base. So if we had to do a spacewalk to fix something, we'd be familiar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was there with the scientists, and we're all on all these platforms and walking around, and it's pretty emotional. And I said, I promise to take really good care of Chandra, but I can't promise to take her home
Right.
or to bring her home.
Yeah.
And I'm just so proud to have been a part of it. And also, we had the first woman commander on that mission. And for you,
That was Eileen Collins.
Eileen Collins, yes, and excellent and amazing. And I think neither Eileen or I are like big, there we were, so dangerous, But if you look up the STS-93 ascent, I mean, it is one of the most, close to catastrophe that didn't end in a catastrophe.
Right. You had, during the power descent, you lost one of the power units.
We had an AC, we had a short.
Oh.
We had a short, and so we lost 2 main engine controllers. So we lose half the data out of the 6.
Wow.
We lose half the data on 2 of the different controllers, but then we also had a leak that they did not know about.
Everything's leaky, man.
I know. Well, space is hard.
Space is hard. You're always using like helium. That stuff is just tiny.
Yes.
That is really tiny. Yeah, on the launch
What was
pad.
the leak on this one? It was a different gas.
This was
probably.
hydrogen.
Oh, also
and so
even
the
tiny.
engine bells
Also
look
tiny.
Like looks like corrugated cardboard right inside. And that's actually little tubes going zip, 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 cooling off heating up the fuel and keeping the engine bell from burning up. And there's just almost a shower head that injects the fuel into the engine, and there's some of the things are plugged up with gold pins when they fired a lot around the outside of the shower head, and one of those gold pins came out, hit the little corrugated things, and actually caused the leak. They didn't know about it, but then because we didn't have all the brains of the controllers, because 2 were we had missing two separate halves, right? It turns out that the way it calculated how to fix itself actually saved us from blowing up. Believe it or not.
Wow.
It's and there's a good video that's out that's animated that I was like, oh, this is a great way to explain this. And so,
cool.
Anyways, It's cool to look up.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That was the one with Chandra on board, or that was a different one?
with Chandra on board.
Wow.
Yep.
Oh man.
Yep.
Amazing. And so was Columbia the only vehicle that could take it because it's slightly lighter than the other orbiters, or
It's
had a larger
actually
payload
heavier, but has a large. The other vehicles had been built out to have an airlock to be able to do spacewalks when you're docked to the ISS.
Okay. So it had more volume in the payload bay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's still just a few inches, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
That's awesome.
Audrey,
Yes.
there were some other activities that Cady did
Yeah,
in
that's right.
space that you wanted to ask about.
Yeah, so in addition to being an astronaut and an author, you're also a flautist.
I say I play the flute.
You play
I think it's more. Because that
You're more of
sounds
a
more
flautist
like
than
more
me.
training and more excellence. But I have great enthusiasm.
Well, I went to your talk yesterday and I saw the video and it sounded like you were pretty good. So, in addition to being a scientist, I have a background in theater. And when I do science or study space, I see theater in the cosmos is dramatic and science is about storytelling. Do you see music in space exploration? Do you see any kind of connection between music or playing the flute or artistic expression and being an astronaut or exploring space?
Well, I think the human side of human spaceflight is underplayed. And actually, the first art experiments were done by the Japanese. Like the U.S., and they were these things like put on costumes and sort of fly around the cabin and do things together, almost like a dramatic thing, right?
Cool.
A sort of little satellite-y thing with lights on it, and then we would turn off the lights and film it in different kinds of things, taking pictures of the moon outside with a camera, and wherever it landed in the frame, there was a composer that put all those notes together and made music. I mean, these were things that Japanese did, right? But not the U.S., because we're a little more like, it's the mission. And I always had to make sure that I got all the stuff I really had to get done. But bringing things like music and instruments and things that other people can relate to, I think it helps share. You can bring other people to space with you. I also think that the teamwork involved in being on a space crew is very similar to literally any team here on the ground, but especially like a band on the road or team. I mean, the things that I see teams doing here at DragonCon together, and but it really, you have to, put aside, kind of like what you feel and whether you wish people were different because the mission's more important. So I think music can really show people that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
And they're sonifying some of the Chandra data lately.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah. There's some cool groups that do different sonification of different types of data. So there's a few for like solar wind that I've heard, but I think there's somebody doing Chandra, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm just always interested in like what one person, it's not that they're a hero, but somebody just goes, here's my idea and I really think you should do it. And in this case, it's a woman named Kim Arkand, who is so good at storytelling. And everything on the Chandra website is herself and her team. And by being, and they're just, because it's a NASA telescope, but it's also Smithsonian, they're sort of in the middle. And a simple thing like the movie Hidden Figures coming out, NASA's like, oh yeah, I guess we should think of some way to celebrate that now that it's playing in the theaters, right? And in the Smithsonian Astrophysics Institute with Kim, already had stories and photos and drawings of a bunch of women and other lost voices that we haven't heard about in science. So I just, especially here in this room, some of you, clearly you have some art and some science in you if you're sitting here, and some vision and imagination. And so realize that even when you're talking to people who don't get you, you might be the most important person in the room.
It's awesome. Yeah.
I didn't mean to leave out the drama people because I really value that.
Oh, we're never left out.
They'll make a scene if they are. Your book is called Sharing Space, and earlier in the snubber you talked about who would you like to bring with you, and you were sort of mentioning the idea of sharing space with people who are not actually going up there through some of these other ways of expression. Who would you most like to share space with literally? In other words, if you were able to say, okay, these 10 people need to go to space, or however many people you want to say, for all the various, I'm imagining, perspective-changing aspects of that, who would you like to see go to space?
Well, I don't work
round
at NASA
trip
anymore.
so
round trip.
yeah,
people want to
coming
send their
back,
teenagers.
so right,
People want to send the teenagers, and then they find out it's a round trip. They're like, oh, really? But I'm still just about this, this mission that, this is a place that belongs to all of us, and certainly when something that's really impactful to me was when I got up there, I didn't feel like I was gone. I just felt like home and Earth were bigger than I thought, right? And so I would, if you asked me to, who am I going to bring, this year, it would be people whose voices are underappreciated. And I'd probably still miss people, but I've been working with a group called Astro Access, folks with disabilities, and the things that they point out, actually, like the fire extinguisher, this is where you find your emergency equipment. There's a nice big arrow in the space station on that sign. And in a smoke-filled capsule or, space station, you're probably not going to know which way that arrow's pointing. And the folks with, sight impaired said, why don't we make it so you can feel it and you know which way.
Yeah.
And it was just all these, so they see things, they bring things to the mission that
different perspectives.
Yeah, and I'm always about what people bring as opposed to maybe what they don't, and I think that's really big. And even, there's still, space is so compelling. I think it's a really valuable vehicle to use to do stuff that is important, not just for space. And so by bringing, like in Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, they're bringing people. They're bringing women and people of color. And, Cyan Proctor is, came on inspiration for a billionaire who chose not to bring other billionaires, but people that needed to go. And she's the first Black woman pilot. How long would we have waited for that? Yeah. Right? And so it just can make so many ripples.
Yeah, we had last time we recorded the podcast, we had a stumper and we were sort of riffing on different answers of who we would bring into space. And we were talking about politicians who maybe would have a better overview effect and things like that too, right?
But I think tried that.
Yeah.
Senator Nelson came in.
Senator Nelson.
And it kind of, I think it did work out in that way.
Yeah.
I think those are good ideas.
Yeah, yeah. And but I think one of the things, I think about a lot because I think about suborbital spaceflight, but also upcoming orbital spaceflight is how we are broadening. It's still early stages, right? Most people still can't go on suborbital or orbital flights, but it's definitely broadening participation and access and thinking about ways to people who can tell the stories differently. I always think of Contact, right? She said it should have been a poet, not her, who was the one on the mission because she just couldn't describe it. There's things like that with who can describe what's happening, who can convey those things back, whether it's through pictures or through words or music or art. I think, yeah.
I will say storytelling really wasn't very appreciated. It was definitely a sort of rebellious thing to do, and I had to be very careful to make sure that on paper, and in true life, everything was done that anybody would want me to have done.
Mhm.
And then so everything that creative that you see was done after 11 o'clock at night, right?
Oh, well.
I mean, and so because there was a certain thing, and now I see a lot of changes in that at NASA and the contractors.
Yeah. It seems like there's a little bit more. I mean, maybe peripherally we're seeing that, but it seems like there's a little bit more freedom now for a little bit of personal time and things like that for the astronauts and for other folks.
I want to come back to that point right after I give our trivia. So we have a trivia question. You inspired this trivia, Cady, but I have to say it's kind of a trick question. I'll be very impressed and surprised if anybody in this room knows the answer.
Well, that's just rude.
Okay.
So it's That's
Challenge accepted. All right, thank you.
I'll just tell you don't know me very well, but none of you want me on your trivia team ever. Ever.
So you famously.
So don't shout out the answer to the trivia.
Right.
We're going to get the answer later in the
end.
episode.
Okay.
So I'm going to.
And I will not shout out.
Here's the question.
The answer I don't know.
So you, as you mentioned, play the flute, and you famously did a flute duet with Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. I'm old enough to be a crazy Jethro Tull fan and have seen Jethro Tull like 30 or 40 times in concert. So I'm almost more jealous of you for having done that than having been an astronaut, even though that was my childhood dream. So the trivia is there is a Jethro Tull song that has the name of an astronaut in the title. Who is that astronaut? And to make it at least partially manageable, it's multiple choice. So your choices are Yuri Gagarin, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, Sally Ride, John Glenn, and John Young. One of those is in the title of a Jethro Tull song.
They're all astronauts.
How many people have never heard of Jethro Tull?
It's okay.
All right.
okay.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
That's totally reasonable.
It's the
Prog
first
rock.
person to bring, maybe not exactly the first, but the first for me, and I think the first, to bring the flute to rock music and improvisational, rock and roll flute.
Yeah.
And he's an astonishingly smart, clever, interested and interesting person, and very all about sustainability.
He did improvisational flute before it was on Anchorman.
Yeah. So we'll come back to that, but you were mentioning before the trivia about sort of attitudes of helping people, and earlier you touched on like the queue in NASA for getting on missions, and in your book you talk about obviously it's incredibly competitive to become an astronaut. Then when you're in the astronaut corps, it's also competitive within that corps. When are you going to get manifested for a flight? Are you going to qualify to be an EVA astronaut? And you describe a system that sounded sort of like we're looking for reasons to cut you out of the EVA program. And you have to be perfect to not hit that, which prevents you from like pointing out difficulties or problems or flaws in the training program. You famously were not given a suit that fit you. If any mistake was made, well, that's your fault. We're going to cut you. And, Addie and actually all three of us are on the faculty at UCF. And some of our colleagues sometimes think that, okay, my job as an instructor is to look for a reason why you can't advance instead of look for a way to help everybody advance. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about how that culture has evolved, if at all, at NASA, and what you've experienced with that.
Well, I'll say the good news is that things are better. Things have improved. And I loved being there, and I loved these people and stuff. That I worked with, that I lived with, that I flew with, all those kinds of things. But the reason I wrote the book is that it's still not an even playing field. Just this year, I heard a story, like a few months ago, I heard a story of someone in the military whose commanding officer did not forward their application because they said she's a single mother and she shouldn't really be thinking of being an astronaut. Happened. Yes. What? Happened.
Seriously?
I don't even know her name, okay? But the fact that it happened, but not so much it's so dramatic as that, and I'm looking at Addie and Audrey, and we walk a different but we walk a different road, and the day that you can be less than excellent, we're still really waiting for that day, right? And so I think it's true, and it has to do with people's assumptions. And I'd say in spacewalking, what typically happened, and certainly in my time was happening, was that you'd have 2 astronauts on the pool deck in their spacesuits ready to go in and practice in the giant swimming pool because it weighs 300 pounds, that suit, right? And if it's you, they're going to go, we'll see how he does. And if it's Audrey, it's going to be, I wonder if she can do that. And I am somebody that they threw out the small spacesuit, affected a third of the women. And basically I was encouraged by a lot of people and helped by a lot of people, and determined because I wanted to, if you didn't qualify in spacewalking, you could not go and live on the space station. There's 3 seats in the capsule, 2 spacewalkers and a backup. And so you couldn't go. And I would have waited actually until the SpaceX capsule was flying with 4 seats.
Oh, wow.
I would have waited 11 years. Right? So, it leaves women out of a whole bunch of things and smaller people. And so, my way, and the title says, making change, my way of making change. I'm not a very good arguer, just like I'm not a good trivia person. I do not know that answer. But it's not my way to argue like that. And so, my way is more, I'm going to help you see my point of view and understand why you should be on this team too, this team that includes me. And I'm very proud of making some changes in that. But Tracy Dyson Caldwell Dyson is up there right now on the space station. And she's the person that came home and said, we are teaching people in a way that, like, we teach everybody everything except spacewalking. And then we just want to wait and see how they do. And she said, let's change the training. And now everybody in a class is getting qualified. And there's an attitude within the new astronaut classes that if everybody doesn't qualify in spacewalking, then the class itself has not succeeded, right?
Yeah, I remember I met John Grunsfeld one time, and he said that I was big enough to be an astronaut and use a spacesuit. So I was like, yes, I'm in.
Oh, all right.
So
it's a true thing. But even I had above average grades in the spacesuit. And people would still go, do you fit in that suit? I'm like, do you think that this chest fits in a small suit? Oh, no, look, I can, really, And you kind of make jokes about it and things like that. But I just think we still live in a world where people make assumptions, and sometimes they just kind of wait to have you prove that they're true, like the remark I made about Boeing.
Yeah.
That, they built the space station. They made all the parts. They're operating it, all those things, a lot of good things. Yeah. But, that we have to make sure we're really generous in our thoughts about people, or else we're not going to have the teams we need.
I'm also all for competition, right? So like the fact that Boeing is struggling right now is frustrating, although they are sort of one of the old players in the game, right? It's interesting to see that they're the ones that are struggling because it's sort of a different paradigm now and things are changing at sort of a rapid pace. It's good to see competitors though for SpaceX and for the other flight participants, right? So I'm hopeful for like New Glenn coming online and some of these other companies that are coming online. Yeah. And
actually, Boeing brings some things, and they had a hard road partly because they chose to go a different way, which is to have a lot of manual control accessible.
Yeah.
And that's what they needed in order to dock, right? And SpaceX doesn't actually have that.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I know one of the challenges for Boeing was actually separating the capsule without a crew on board from the ISS, right? Is because it was planned to be, everything for them is planned to be manual, which is so different than SpaceX, which is working toward capsules that anybody can be in, so they can basically be autonomous. And that's what Blue does with their New Shepard capsule, too.
But you mentioned the hot second last week when they had a landing incident, SpaceX did. And one of the things that's been coming up in the press conferences is, if it's so much trouble, aren't we just going to scrap this thing? And, Senator Nelson, the administrator's like, no, we want Boeing to succeed because we want 2 different ways to get people and stuff up to space from the space station. Because it's all about landing on the moon, living on the moon, going onto Mars. And when that happened last week, I was like, this could be timely. To everybody I know, I was like, well, holy shit, are they... Sorry.
That's okay.
Are they actually now stranded for a while? Everybody?
Yeah.
But apparently not.
Well, because there's been 2 incidents actually since they've been up there, right? So the SpaceX had a booster. Second stage didn't make it to orbit and it blew up. And So SpaceX was grounded for like 2 weeks, and then more recently the booster fell over, which it was just tired. I think.
Yeah.
I think
Done
that's.
like-
I think
done
that's
like
going to be
20
the false
flights or
analysis.
something,
Is
that
its
booster.
leg was just like tired and it fell over. It's going to be hard to land on a rocking barge. I don't know. I'd be tired too if I'd done that 23 times.
That's fair.
But I thought the lessons that you were talking about, and just expanding on there with the EVA training and everything, and people's attitudes, it was a useful reminder to me as an educator and to all of us. Is like, we're here to help. To name another podcast, we're here to try to help people overcome barriers rather than throwing barriers up as a way to eliminate people. And so I think it's a useful lesson that came from your experience as an astronaut, but is broadly applicable to all of us.
And I think being somebody who is in between, or somebody who is very accepted into management and decision making, I had help from a number of those people that were nothing like me, but saw my potential. And for example, I'll just use his name because it's in the book too, but Chris Hadfield, Canadian astronaut, test pilot, so very visible to that more management group, right, and decision making. There's people that when he was chief of robotics, they'd say, "Oh, these people cannot be taught." And he's like, "Well, maybe not in the way we are teaching them." Or he was actually head of Capcoms for a while and suggested that I be a Capcom. And they're like, "Cady talks a lot." And he's like, "Oh, we're building a space station. Copy and Roger are not going to do it."
Yeah.
And, if anybody can build a bridge between places, which is what Capcomming, being the speaker, is all about, it's her. But the fact that he said this to them then got me those qualifications.
Yep. Yeah.
So everybody has a role.
Yeah.
Mentioning Chris Hadfield, he's not in the title of a Jethro Tull song. However, which astronaut is it? Is it Yuri Gagarin, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, Sally Ride, John Glenn, or John Young? Anybody have a guess?
I don't know the answer, but I will guess Sally Ride, because that just sounds like a good name to put in a song.
I'm going to guess John Glenn.
I'm going to guess, and I don't know, Michael Collins.
Okay. Does anybody in the audience know? It is Michael Collins. In fact, I'll tell you what.
Subliminally, some piece went in.
And it's Michael Collins, of course. Apollo 11 was the astronaut
I would have you on my trivia team.
Who remained in the capsule while Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong descended to the moon. And the song is about him being left alone behind on that capsule and wishing that he was down there with them. So, congratulations! That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You're 100. You're 100% at Walkabout Trivia.
Yep.
There you go. Well done.
Yay!
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're gonna wrap up the show so that people in the audience want to have some questions here for us. So, yeah, go ahead. You can start lining up with the mics. Had we all been in space, we might have done about a half a tour of the planet right now.
Exactly.
Instead, it was just another episode of Walkabout the Galaxy. I didn't give you your outro speech. Yeah.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram and YouTube. Our theme music was composed by Richard Jarusik. Production assistance is provided by Logan Basinger.
A big thank you to Dr. Cady Coleman for sharing her inspiring stories and insights with us. Her book, Sharing Space, is available now. Thank you to Rain Glenn and DragonCon for hosting us. I'm Josh Caldwell.
I'm Addie Dove.
And I'm Audrey Martin.
We're the Astroquarks, signing off until the next episode of Walkabout the Galaxy. Thanks, everybody.